Welcome back, grade 9. This is lesson 3, accountability in government. We have studied some of these concepts before. We've looked at media, and we're going to revisit it again here today. We're going to add some more information about bias and detecting of bias, and we'll try to detect bias by looking at two captions. We're also going to look at lobby groups here today and the role that lobby groups play within a democracy as well. So, to begin with, we have this visual. And this visual communicates to you just some of the many ways that the government may be held accountable by the media. So newspapers, for example, may report ethical violations that the government is guilty of. So mayor denies using illegal drugs in his youth, federal judge confirms fraud in 2011 federal election, federal vote. Senator says he will quit Senate after expense scandal. So if the media has exposed these scandals, then once that information has become public, there may be pressure for those impacted by the scandal, those who have seemed to have, ethical violations, to step down from their positions. So in summary, the main thing we need to know about media is its role in a democracy is media is the, anybody remember the term? Media is the something of democracy. So media is the watchdog. So if you didn't have that down, now's a good time to write it in your notes. So I'm looking at a class, and I'm seeing one notebook open. So bravo to you, it must be my shiny bald head that was inspiring you to open it up. This shiny bald head. So if I stand here, just the glare alone might be blinding you at home. So that's why I'm not going to stand there. So once again, media is the watchdog of democracy. So as you're writing that down, I'm going to talk about that role again. What is a watchdog? What does a watchdog do? Well, a watchdog's purpose, their whole purpose of being, why would you have a watchdog? Maybe some of you have a watchdog. Any of you have a watchdog at home? So, why do you guys have a watchdog? What's their job? Their job is to? Make sure nothing bad happens. Make sure nobody's jumping over your fence and stealing your bike that's in the backyard. Making sure that nobody's breaking into your car that's parked in the back. So a watchdog sounds the alarm. The media is the watchdog of democracy. Their job is to sound the alarm and say, hey, wait, everybody look over here. The government's guilty of violating our trust. They've done something that they shouldn't. And we need you to pay attention to this. So, for example, recently, the Trudeau government was linked with a scandal with the We Charity, where millions of dollars were channeled from taxpayers to the charity, and within the charity it was being channeled back to Trudeau's family and supporters. And we see that as a violation of trust, and therefore the media ran the story so that we could be knowledgeable about it. If the media hadn't reported it, no doubt we may not have heard of it. So, because unfortunately, by nature, even politicians are not perfect human beings. They may be subject to temporary lapses of ethical judgment. There are times when the media, as the watchdog of democracy, needs to sound the alarm and start barking and say something's bad here. You may recall that I mentioned an example, and that was Edward Snowden, and that Edward Snowden had worked with the NSA in the United States. And working with the NSA, his job was to ensure the security of America. Today is September the 11th, and following September the 11th, 2001, the United States people felt very vulnerable to terrorist threats like Al-Qaeda. And therefore, the USA Patriot Act was passed. But unfortunately, Edward Snowden was finding evidence that the USA Patriot Act was being used and misused to the extent that privacy of average American people were being violated without their knowledge. So he sounded the alarm. He's like, okay guys, you're not aware that this is happening, but you need to be aware that this is happening. That's an example of someone being a watchdog. I also mentioned in a previous class that another example would be looking at the history of America. There's something called the Watergate scandal. That during an election in the United States, a federal election, we had one of the parties, the Republican Party, with the Republican President Richard Nixon. He was found to have some of his advisors, his staff, that put listening devices into a hotel room in the Watergate Hotel, and they were doing that to listen to those assembled in that room, the Democrats, and to see what their strategy was for the election. So the Republicans were caught spying on the Democrats to see what their election strategy was. When Nixon was exposed for this, through the watchdog of the media, through two watchdog journalists, Woodward and Bernstein, he resigned. He resigned from office. So what we see is that the media is a watchdog of democracy. But that was a lesson we've already done. Today what we're seeing, sometimes the media is biased. So, just like your dog in your backyard, your dog's biased. So if I jump your fence and I'm trespassing, your dog may bite me because your dog doesn't know me. Your dog has no loyalty to me. But maybe one of your friends jumps the fence and your dog likes your friend. Rather than biting your friend, the dog comes over and licks your friend's face. And then your friend takes your bicycle. So, just like your dog may have divided loyalties, the media may too. So this lesson, this document, shows in two articles about the same event so that we can detect bias. So the event is the Pope, the Catholic Pope, coming to America. Now we have two reports on Pope Francis coming to America. And by looking at the language within the two reports, we can see different spins of the story. So looking at the language in the first one, you can see that it focuses on the Pope pleading for tolerance, talks about how America is a land with tremendous gifts and opportunities. He's praying for us. It focuses on the fact that people journeyed from across the Americas to see, to witness, and to rejoice with him. So this first summary of the event is very positive. It's connecting this Pope to tolerance and openness and inclusiveness. Tolerance and openness and inclusiveness are goals that many have for society. So these are reasons for even non-Catholics to celebrate this Pope as a very progressive Pope, as a Pope who's trying to create a better community, a better society, a better world. Calls him the People's Pope. It even talks, he even addresses some of the scandals of the church, and is trying to build upon faith and overcome the dangers of temptation. So this is a very positive article about the Pope, Pope Francis, and it still deals with some of the issues that the church has had, but it allows the language of the Pope to respond with positive hope. Now, looking at the next article, though, it includes, even just in the title, false prophet. Even in the title, we get like a different tone. And then as you read through the events here, you can see there's some phrases kind of leap from the page and show that this is an article written to discredit the Pope. It mentions that Pope Francis has an agenda And his agenda is an assault on the family, an assault on the free market. So just the language alone that is being used here is a different spin of the same story. Both of them have a bias. The first one is more of a pro-Pope Francis bias, and the second one is more of an anti-Pope Francis bias. So the point being is that we have a watchdog, and it is the media. But our watchdog has loyalty to people beyond us. Our watchdog may be loyal to Pope Francis, or may not be loyal to Pope Francis. If we only read one article about Pope Francis, we're only getting one side of a story. The real challenge with the media, and we've seen these terms before when we studied the textbook, is that there's a concentration of ownership of the media. Concentration of ownership of the media means that there's 6 conglomerates in the world. And we showed the illustrations on the board. 6 conglomerates of the world that control the majority of the media. So it's very unlikely that you get a diversity of opinion. If you go to ESPN, you go to ABC, you go to Disney, you're only getting one story because the same conglomerate owns all of that. And there's a danger in that. There's a danger that there's a convergence of what you'll actually be exposed to. So media bias is significant because they have a job, they have a responsibility. They're our watchdog. And if the watchdog's not doing their job, then we may be losing things from democracy, and we may not even be aware of it. Now, the media is not the only tool of accountability. We have a responsibility as citizens as well. But often, we get our opinions from the media. So we have this cartoon, and we have 2 gentlemen sitting in a bar, and one gentleman says, "Only mindless sheep watch Fox News." And the other guy says, "Oh, that's harsh, man. Why do you say that? Some dude on CNBC said I should." So the guy on the right, ironically, sees how people who get all of their opinions from Fox are just simple sheep. And it's ironic that he sees that because he's a sheep of CNBC. So the cartoonist is trying to expose this very real problem that if we limit ourselves to just one source of information, we only limit ourselves to 1 or 2 pieces of media, then we're getting a very spun and biased story. This is how in the United States you have millions of people that are passionate that Trump has done everything right. And you have millions of people that are passionate that Trump is the main problem with America today. You'll have Trump deliver a speech, and you'll have some reporters announce that Trump's speech is exactly what America needs, and in his language, Americans can find all the solutions that they need, and he's a great president. Others will report that he's delusional, that he's a narcissist, that he's racist, based upon the language of the same speech. So you'll have reporters go to the president's speech, and before they go, they already have made up their mind what they're going to write about. Even though they haven't heard the speech yet, they haven't seen the speech, they've already predetermined how they feel about the president. So they write a story that reflects their agenda. So different media venues, they have agendas to either discredit a political party or to promote them. And this has really created a divided America today. So we'll have events, and some people will look at protests or riots, and they'll say, this is America showing citizen activism, and the protests should be celebrated. And there'll be people looking at the same protests and saying those are criminals. We need to bring in the military and arrest them and restore order. So stories can be spun. And that's the main message of the media. Now the concern is that within your lifetime, you're going to pay hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of dollars of taxes. The government's going to spend your money. Many years you'll be spending half of what you make. You make $100,000, you're paying like $50,000 income and property, goods and services and luxury taxes. So that's the significance here. We're putting a lot of money in the hands of people. Can we trust them? Well, I do not personally know all of the politicians. I need someone or something else to watch over them for me. And the watchdog of democracy in Canada is the media. So when there's a scandal in Ottawa, I'm living in Wetaskiwin. I don't know what's happening in Ottawa. It's a long ways away. Somebody in Ottawa, a watchdog journalist, needs to be watching over and saying, oh, there's something wrong here. You know, Trudeau is in violation of the trust of the people. And this is why. So we had that list on the board about all the scandals in Canada's, political history. That's why we need a watchdog. It's because people are tempted and they have budgets of billions of dollars. Keeping in mind that the Trudeau government just this year have spent hundreds of billions of dollars in response to COVID-19. Hundreds of billions. Do you think they have receipts for it all? They don't have receipts. They've lost billions of dollars. They can't account for where it went. Billions of dollars. So if there's 38 million Canadians and they lose $38 billion, how much of your money have they lost? And are you okay with that? They've lost thousands of dollars of just your money. That's why we need someone watching over. Because somebody's stealing from you. Maybe you're independently wealthy and you're not concerned about it. But we need a media that will celebrate the Liberal Party and celebrate the Trudeau government when they do great stuff. But we also need a media that will chastise them when they're acting as criminals. We need an independent media. And the point being that in an authoritarian state, like the state of Adolf Hitler's Germany that we often reference, you would not have seen an independent media. The media would have been a lapdog of the government. The media serves the wishes of the government. The concern we have in Canada and the United States is our media is now a lapdog too. Maybe not of government, but of the corporate elite that owns them. Their owners trained them to push an agenda at the expense of another. So there's another way to hold the government accountable, and that, here's a little cartoon about the media spoon-feeding us. I think that's pretty comical. But there's another way to hold the government accountable, and that's through lobby groups. So what are lobby groups? Well, their name, nobody rested for let's sit here for weeks and come up with a really good name. Their name kind of defines it all. Their name comes from the fact that they would wait in the lobby, and when the politicians would take their break, maybe decades ago it would be a smoke break, maybe now it's a lunch break. That's if government ever actually meets again, because currently our Prime Minister has prorogued government, so our House of Commons isn't meeting. But let's say the government is meeting, and they have a quorum, they have a forum, they have a meeting, they have question period. At the end of that, you might have reporters waiting to talk to the politicians, but you also have lobby groups sitting in the lobby, groups of just citizens that have some kind of special interest. Lobby groups are also special interest groups. There's something that they're passionate about. I often use the the example, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. It's an obvious one. So there's a lobby group in Canada called MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. And unfortunately, many of them have been directly affected by drunk drivers. So they lobby, they pressure, lobby groups are also called pressure groups, they pressure the government to hear their special interest. Lobby groups, pressure groups, special interest, all the same thing. Their special interest is, hey government, hey legislative branch, I need you to create a law that will put into place action by the executive branch that will change Canada in a way that deals with my special interest. So if your special interest is Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, maybe you create laws that are more severe against drunk drivers. If your lobby group is Amnesty International, maybe you're pressuring the government of Canada to do more globally to free political prisoners. If your lobby group is Greenpeace, then you're going to be pressuring the government to consider climate change and the impact our economic activities have on the earth. So lobby groups have a special interest, and they want to pressure the government into considering that special interest and either creating new laws under the legislative branch or carrying out the existing laws that are already in paper through the executive branch to create a Canada where that special interest is not a concern anymore. Let's create a Canada where mothers don't have to be directly affected by drunk drivers. Let's create a Canada where we can be proud of our climate record. So those are lobby groups. Now in the lesson that we have here, lesson 3, accountability in government, it looks at Australia, it looks at New Zealand, and it looks at the United States, and it looks at lobby groups and how lobby groups can be there to represent workers, unions. Lobby groups could be there to represent regions of Canada that feel marginalized. Lobby groups may be active leading up to an election to try to shape platforms. Leading up to an election, politicians will need to have support. So lobby groups will take advantage of that opportunity to provide support with conditions. And those conditions might be, will you be hearing about our special concerns? So there were some ideas here about what lobby groups are up to in our handout as well. And if you go to the link on lobby groups, there's a number of videos attached to it as well. So in the future, if you're writing a report at home about lobby groups for me, we have all these related videos about lobby groups from Australia, mostly, and they give examples of special interests that people have. Either they want the Trans-Pacific Partnership to be passed, or they don't want the Trans-Pacific Partnership to be passed. So lobby groups are special interest groups. They want to pressure the government into considering what they are passionate about. So what is accountability, in summary? Accountability is holding the government responsible. You must be accountable for your actions. You need to be held responsible. So from your perspective, accountability, let's say as a 14-year-old, as a 15-year-old, that maybe you make a mistake. It's not just a little mistake. You may have to be held accountable for that. If you damage property of someone else. If you decide to invite friends over, and by friends it leads to dozens of friends, and maybe there's some damage done at your house. And maybe your sister's stereo gets destroyed, or your brother's TV gets destroyed. Your parents might be looking for accountability. They might say, you know what, you're gonna have to pay for the repairs. You need to buy your brother a new TV, or a new game system, your sister a new stereo. Well, sometimes our government acts irrationally. Sometimes our government acts irresponsibly, and we need to hold them accountable. The media is our watchdog. They sound the alarm if the government's doing something wrong. And then ultimately, we as the electorate, we can decide on which party we believe should be the next government come election time. So accountability is directly elected or directly connected to the idea of elections that we talked about yesterday. So come election time, we should be reviewing the record of our candidates and their parties and say, who do I want to best guide my country and spend my tax dollars? Who do I trust? That's accountability. We have a democracy in Canada. Democracy is meant to be a system for the people and by the people. That the foundation of legitimacy in a democracy is the will of the people. The government is meant to do our will. If the government is betraying our social contract, then accountability and legitimacy has been lost. So the purpose of accountability is to ensure democracy. So I'm going to wrap it up there, and then we're going to be looking at some enrichment videos that can look at if we're trying to, ensure democracy, maybe we can look forward to the future and say, how can we make democracy even better? So we're going to look at some TED Talks now that will look at making democracy even better. Making it more engaging for citizens and taking away some of the big government as well.